Be very, very quiet. I'm hunting Valstrax. Ah! Uh-oh. This fight isn't even that bad. I don't even see what everyone's complaining about. Oh, okay. You can calm down a little, Valstrax. What the hell? There's more? Aw, hell. Why? Why? Oh, the humanity. Don't do it, Valstrax. He's only a boy. This obnoxious rocket dragon. Never before in Rise/Sunbreak have I seen so many carts and failed quests. It's fast, it's mean, and it's got a hell of a Shoryuken. Not to mention that it deals out one-shots like they're going out of style. Yes, Risen Valstrax is a real challenge, a real punch in the nards, a real kick in the dick, a real... It can be beaten, though. It can be bested, and I'm going to give you the tools to do it. Now, I won't be listing out some overly specific strategy or any of that malarkey. No cheese will be required. Instead, we're going to break down all of its attributes and moves so that you can make the pattern recognition in your brain your bitch. And in time, you'll be absolutely dunking on this fool of a dragon. So let's get into it. Now that the preamble is out of the way, let's talk requirements. First off, you're going to need to be Master Rank 160 to even challenge Risen Valstrax, but that's honestly not super important. What is important is defense. I would say that 750 plus is the absolute minimum you should be going into this fight with. Upgrade your armor, slot in defense decos, do whatever you gotta do to pump those numbers up so that you aren't getting absolutely bodied by Valstrax's attacks, and in turn, letting your team down. Your job, first and foremost, is to stay alive, and you can't do that with low defense. Our resident rocket dragon also does plenty of dragon attacks, go figure, so if you have the space, maybe a little dragon resistance wouldn't hurt you either. It's not as important, though, as those sweet, delicious raw defense numbers, though, and this goes double for you gunnin' folks, since you just take 30% more damage because apparently equipping a bowgun turns your bones into glass.
I was born with glass bones and paper skin.
For skills, you're going to have a much better time if you have Evade Extender and possibly some Evasion up, or if you're into shields, guard up and guard skills. I would almost hazard to say that Evade Extender is pretty much necessary for this fight due to the insane tracking on Valstrax's attacks. For items, I wouldn't leave home without the full gamut. We're talking Mega Pots, Max Pots, Nullberries for Dragon Blade, a Farcaster, which is a surprise tool that will help us later, Life Powders, and of course Mega Demon and Armor Drugs. We're going to need all the help we can get. This is a beginner's guide after all. Over time, as you improve, you can start ditching these medical aids, but for now, we're taking out all the stops. We're also going to be getting the birds.
This bird is dead!
Yeah, I know, I hate the birds. We all hate the birds, but this fight seems specifically tuned around having a good chunk of these little avian bastards collected, especially the health birds. To meet you halfway, I'm showing the route I take to quickly get a good chunk of health birds and get my buffs on. Now, I have Spiritbird's Call slotted in and Camelio's Blessing on this set, so it's not as tedious for me, but your mileage may vary with this route, but it works for me. Just get the damn birds. It's not a time save if we end up failing the quest. Crappy mechanic or not, we gotta deal with it. So let's talk weaknesses. Risen Valstrax effectively has 3 forms: base form, amped form, and risen form. In all 3 modes, its hit zones change quite a bit, which you can find all the data for on Kiriniko if you are so inclined. You can also just pause the video and peruse at your leisure. All elements are generally acceptable against it, except for Dragon. If you bring Dragon element, it's going to be Dragon D's nuts all over your face.
Got him!
Seriously, don't bring it. It does absolutely nothing. Now, I don't really expect anyone other than speedrunners to memorize all these hit zone values, so let's break it down to be a little bit more digestible. In base form, aim for his derriere if you're using a cutting weapon, even after the tail cut, or aim at his face. These are basically your 2 main options. His legs and wings have pitiful values at this point and won't even proc weakness exploit unless you're using a blunt weapon on the wings. Ranged attackers pretty much only have the face to work with. In the amped state, parts of it start to glow a deep crimson, and surprise, surprise, with great glow comes great weakness. Its wings become massively weak to damage, particularly important when it gets knocked down, though more often than not, knocking it to the dirt will take it out of the amped state. In Risen form, however, this changes dramatically. If you can knock it down while it's in its Risen form, clip those wings. They are ridiculously vulnerable. Now bears a special mention. Occasionally in pretty much all the forms, you'll see Valstrax enter an animation where he begins charging up. In addition, its chest starts to glow. When you see this, cave that motherfucker in. Stop whatever you're attacking and go absolutely ham on that chest.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
You have a pretty limited window, which will vary throughout the fight, but I can never really tell when he's going to charge up for a long time or a little time, so better to err on the side of safety. If you're successful in breaking its chest meat, it'll overload, causing an explosion for a huge mondo mama damage, in addition to a knockdown where you and the gang can just start kicking the crap out of it. As for ailments, really only Blast is the standout here. Valstrax is fairly resistant to every single ailment except for Blast. Also prepare for a long-ish fight, especially if you aren't used to this particular Elder's shenanigans. Risen Valstrax has between 65,000 and 72,000 HP for only one person. Plan for a marathon, not a race, especially because it's a fairly mobile opponent. Now onto the moves. Valstrax has quite a few of them, and they differ based on his current form. We'll go through the main trouble moves available to each form, starting with his base form. As the dragon drags on, it'll spend more and more time in its Risen state, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Also a dangerous move, point out the tell, whether it be audio or visual, so we can start seeing the patterns. For demonstration purposes, I have Evade Extender 2 and Evasion Up 4 skills. Valstrax has so much tracking on most of his attacks, it's pretty difficult to get around not using them without being insane at the game. Let's get started. Valstrax's base form is his least dangerous and least vulnerable, at least in terms of hit zones. Most of its attacks will peter out after a single strike and are usually easy to dodge, with plenty of time for counter-strikes in between each attack. In every form, it'll start out with a Roar, which is a great time to get some power-up iframe moves, especially if you're playing the Switch Axe like I am. It's not a terribly hard roar to time, but you get little in the way of a proper cue. Valstrax tucks its head to the side, and after about a second, he rapidly raises his head. You want to time your move right before it raises its head. The forward dive is an uncommon attack in the base form. If you're far enough away, simply dodging to the left or right will let you easily evade this attack. If you're too close, however, you have no choice but to iframe it like here. Luckily, it doesn't possess lingering hitboxes, so it's fairly easy to iframe. The aerial dive in base form can be dodged by either running or dodging backwards, preferably back and to the right, as it summons a line of explosive dragon energy in the path of its striking wing. Don't try to iframe this attack, as it has lingering hardy frames out the frickin' wazoo. It can also be dodged by running to the right or left, though I would get in the habit of dodging to your right, Valstrax's left, as this attack changes in amped and Risen forms. The proximity laser explosion is one of Valstrax's many "get off me, bro" attacks. The posture it takes is very distinct, getting up on its hind legs and raising its wings. Try to get behind Valstrax or in front. Iframing the move is possible, but difficult due to this strange delayed nature of the attack. It also sends you flying, putting you in a very vulnerable state for follow-up attacks. The 1-2 Shoryuken has Valstrax first doing a basic bitch swipe with either forelimb, easy to iframe or simply dodge backwards. Valstrax then follows it up by crouching like a pouncing cat as it builds up strength for a massive uppercut with a matching audio cue. Valstrax seems to favor doing the Shoryuken with the limb on the opposite side of its body that it did the initial swipe with. You can also see the side it will strike will be a little lower in its pouncing posture. In base form, you can easily run laterally to avoid it, and it seems to be easier to avoid if you run in the direction of the striking limb. Just don't attempt to dodge backwards, you will get caught every time. Important note here is that if you get struck by the initial swipe, you are actually safe from the follow-up uppercut as long as you don't do anything, though this may only apply in its amped or Risen state where the follow-up attack is faster. The Destructo laser is a particularly nasty attack. If you're already close to Valstrax, just continue circling it and you should be fine. If you're far away, however, you might be a little up Shit's Creek. The initial laser strike is not particularly hard to dodge as long as you go to either side, but the follow-up has some pretty insane tracking, especially in amped or risen form. Even sprinting laterally as hard as you can will still get you hit more often than not, so your best bet is to Superman dive. You can also iframe it, but I don't recommend it as this attack has one-shot potential. The stab combo starts with Valstrax cocking one of its wings and then stabbing forward. Dodge to the inside to easily avoid it. From here, however, it gets a little tricky as Valstrax can do a few things to follow it up. You can either simply repeat the same move but with the opposite wing, which is easily dodged using the same above method, or it will bring the same wing back almost vertically and do a big ol' spin attack, spinning in the direction of the chosen wing. You get an audio cue to prepare you that sounds like scraping metal. The difficulty with this attack is that the hitbox is a little wonky, to say the least.
That's quite big.
Additionally, Valstrax travels a bit in the arc, making sticking to the big dragon somewhat difficult. You are most safe right up next to or under the big galoot, but given the speed of the attack, you are most often just best iframing it. If iframing is your plan, dodge into the attack, meaning the opposite direction. This will leave you in contact with the attack for the least amount of active frames. Always plan, however, on Valstrax simply stabbing with the other limb, as it comes up much faster than the spin attack and is hard to react to. The jump stab has Valstrax doing a lazy, somewhat arcing jump into the air and stabbing downward with one of its wings, easily avoidable simply by mirroring its own arc movement. This attack changes significantly in risen form. The wing slam is usually performed when you are either to Valstrax's side or behind it. First, it bunches up and looks towards the strike target like it has a dirty little secret, then slams their wing once in base form on the target. This also leaves behind dragon residue to the outside and inside of the strike. Avoid this by dodging laterally to the inside. Don't underestimate the tracking on this attack. Valstrax is more than capable of scooching backwards to strike you if you thought of trying to dodge towards it, and has surprising reach if you try and dodge away. The wing swipe has Valstrax almost holding its wing in a shielded style posture before swiping outwards, leaving behind explosive dragon energy. Easy to iframe, and the attack has little tracking, so getting around to its dragon booty is a safe dodging option. The wing swoop is a little different, having Valstrax bring one wing into the air before doing a relatively slow slap with its charged wing, kind of like a hand. This attack has an honestly weird hitbox that is difficult to explain. It has little tracking, so getting behind Valstrax is the safest option, but don't be surprised if you just don't get it inexplicably. The front flip dunk explosion is honestly one of the most difficult attacks to prepare for. Valstrax seems to run forward haphazardly, which looks like several other attacks, but then stops short and does a fucking front flip, absolutely annihilating everything below. This attack is quick, covers a large area, and is fairly seldom used, which makes constantly keeping it in mind a challenge. The best tell I can give you is how it flops its head around like a doofus on the initial starting run. If you see that, dodge diagonally towards Valstrax and to the left or right, whichever side you're closest to. The Nom Nom tackle has Valstrax rearing up on one of its forelimbs before performing a double bite tackle. Don't try to iframe this, as it has a ton of active hurt frames. Just dodge to either side to easily avoid it. The feint slam is marked by having Valstrax perform a weak forelimb swipe while its wings are in a forward position, which is quickly followed by an absolute slam jam by the wing on the same side as the forelimb swipe. This attack is notoriously difficult to avoid if you're at mid-range. If you get hit by the forelimb swipe, do not immediately wirebug, as you will get slammed by the wing almost every time, and most importantly, unlike just about every single attack in the game, you are not safe on the ground after getting slammed by the wing.
I've made a huge mistake.
The follow-up explosion will hurt you, which means I hope you have a wirebug to spare at this point, or you are very likely just straight up dead. Dodging to the side and towards Valstrax is your safest bet, as the wing itself covers more area the farther you get from Valstrax. Valstrax also has many energy ball volley attacks that will not get their own names. In general, these are Valstrax's least dangerous attacks as long as you either move towards or away to the side as it performs them, and also steer clear of the dragon residue explosions they create in amped and risen forms. Finally, we get to the amped state, marked by the wing arms and wings constantly being bathed in bright crimson flames. Valstrax has some new attacks, but it additionally changes already existing ones, as well as just making all of the attacks faster. The 3-piece combo is a 4-limb swipe, followed by a leaping wing slam, followed by a shoryuken uppercut. You can avoid these the same way you avoided the above-mentioned attacks, it's just a new sequence that you need to be aware of. Occasionally, the leaping wing slam will be followed by another leaping wing slam instead of an uppercut. The wing slam is now a double attack always, first with one wing and then the other, each with dragon energy explosions to follow. Dodge each of them as you would one individually and you'll be fine. Remember, however, that each of them have great tracking, so delay your dodges. The wing swipe is now a combo starter, not a one-shot Johnny. It's no longer safe to just charge in after Valstrax uses his attack, so here it is converting the wing swipe into a 3-piece combo and absolutely dusting me for my arrogance. It can also go into the stab combo if he's so inclined. Aerial Dive Bomb has now evolved into the Tokyo Drift Aerial Dive Bomb, which is why I suggested earlier dodging to the right. When Valstrax lands, it will slide on the ground in an arc to face you, and this attack has damage frames the entire time that Valstrax is sliding. Seriously, it's ridiculous. Just dodge to the right, and do not touch it until you are sure it's done sliding. Finally, we get to the dreaded Risen state, marked by the big orange charging aura like Valstrax is channeling its inner Super Saiyan. Once we get to this part of the fight, there is basically no going back. If you deal enough damage to Valstrax, it will trigger a knockdown and temporarily remove the Risen state from Valstrax, reverting it back to base form, but this will not last long. It seems the lower health Valstrax gets, the sooner it will charge right back up to its Risen form. This form is hella dangerous. Not only do we have new attacks and more altered attacks, but the attack chains get more elaborate. It can be very difficult to tell when it's safe to attack Valstrax, as it will just seem to constantly keep striking. Even avoiding attacks long enough to heal back to full can be a challenge at times. The big elephant in the room is the attack that usually immediately follows Valstrax charging up, the ambush. But what if I told you that it's actually barely a big deal? Yeah, I actually find it easier to avoid than the standard Valstrax ambush. For one, we get a way longer lead-up time. Valstrax will carpet bomb the area with dragon energy, which will explode before the ambush completes, giving us plenty of time to heal up or just generally get our wits about us. Just don't stand in the glowy damage bits and you should be fine. After that, we have a few options. 2 of them involve just leaving. Yeah, it's that simple. Either use your Farcaster for ultimate safety, like I mentioned to grab earlier,
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
or simply go to an area where Valstrax just can't follow you. You will never get dive bombed in these areas. It's as simple as that. You can also time out the ambush with a Superman dive using an audio cue, which is necessary through the large desert areas if you don't have a Farcaster. It's also not necessarily a one-shot if you have full health birds and decent defense. The second, smaller pygmy elephant in the room is the charge-up spin-to-win attack that gets people killed more often than not. If you see Valstrax take a pouncing position and the screen begins to glow orange, just get the fuck out of there. This attack has a huge range and, more importantly, doesn't knock you over, leaving you just weak enough to get absolutely murder-lurtled by the follow-up charge stab. My best advice is to clear the area code as best you can. If you get hit, immediately wirefall and prepare to Superman dive the follow-up stab. Err on the side of Supermaning early. It gives you a surprising amount of iframes. The wing slam attack is no longer necessarily 2 wing slams back to back, but rather can be converted into a deadly, deadly uppercut. The Tokyo Drift Aerial Dive Bomb is now quickly followed up by other attacks, leaving you with one less safe option you can exploit for attacks. The jumping stab is now followed almost every single time by a huge energy slamming explosion. The explosion extends in a plus-like pattern, leaving large gaps between the lines where you'll be more or less safe if you dodge into a diagonal space. The forward dive is now always followed by a faster forward dive back near Valstrax's original position. This dive usually needs to be iframed due to its insane speed. Just don't chase Valstrax after the first forward dive and prepare to dodge the second. The second dive is usually followed by, you guessed it, even more attacks. But that's it. That's basically all of Valstrax's attacks and attack variations. I find it helps me personally to name the attacks and attack combos because it helps me order them and see the patterns, so to speak, a little easier. It's an insanely difficult fight though, so don't feel bad for getting murked a few times while you're learning it. I'm not the greatest at the fight yet personally. I think my best clear time thus far is about 11 minutes solo, but I can clear the big jackass rocket dragon consistently without fainting, which I wager is basically all what most people want to accomplish. This is the call to action part where I beg for subs and likes, or it probably would be better to put it earlier in the video, but hey, I like a good video flow, and it tends to upset that. Just give me some YouTube sugar if you feel so inclined, or if this video helped you out. For now though, go put your ass-kicking boots on and give Valstrax the old what for. I believe in you. For now though, peace out, and as always, stay safe out there.